All right, welcome everybody. We are super excited to be here. I mean, I am at least. We're very grateful that Joel Ferry is here. I'm going to do a quick introduction of him and then we'll let him do his presentation. So, Joel Ferry was born and raised in West Corinne in Box Elder County, and he's always loved the land and community spirit that's felt in northern Utah. Joel graduated from Box Elder High School in 1996 and served a mission in Brazil. He graduated from Utah State University with a degree in economics and finance in 2003. Upon graduating, he worked as an analyst and loan officer for Zions Bank, and he currently operates a vertically integrated ranching, farming, and feedlot operation in Corinne. I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming you're gonna...
I don't either.
Oh, all right.
I'm a farmer.
It's on your
That's what
website.
it means.
In 2013, Joel and his wife Becca were named the top young farmer and rancher by the Utah Farm Bureau, and in 2018, Joel was named Conservationist of the Year by the Intermountain West Joint Venture. Way to go. Politics have always been important to him, and he is passionate about making his community better. He has served in leadership positions, including chairman and treasurer of the Box Elder County Republican Party, Utah Farm Bureau, chairman of the Willard Peak chapter of Delta Waterfowl, treasurer of the Friends of the Bear River Bird Refuge, and a member of the Northern Regional Advisory Council for the Division of Wildlife Resources. Lots of words. It's all on his website. You can look it up. So last July, he was nominated by Governor Spencer Cox to serve as the executive director of the Utah Department of Natural Resources. He is currently serving in that position, and let's welcome him.
Thank you, Heidi, and it's a real pleasure and honor to be here with you today. Clicker? Okay. So I am Joel Ferry, and I'm the director of the Department of Natural Resources, and I wanted to kind of today really hone in and talk a lot about some of the issues that we're dealing with in the state of Utah, and how does it apply to you as students and as faculty, but mainly as students, and what careers are available, and what can you do to make a difference in natural resources, in environmental policy, in wildlife, in public lands, and what opportunities truly exist here. And so I want to talk about how do we balance all the different demands that we have in the state of Utah. Heidi talked about this. I'm a former legislator, fifth generation farmer rancher. I grew up on the shores of the Great Salt Lake. I remember as a little kid, I'm going to step right here so the light's not in my eyes. Is that okay? Okay. I remember as a little kid, the floods of the 80s. I was 7, 8 years old, and a big portion of my farm, where I grew up, was underwater, was under the lake. I can remember riding my bike down there and looking out and just seeing this vast expanse of water. And I had some feed yards flooded, farm fields flooded for years. And it really stands out in my mind because I remember as a kid I had to go and repair all those fences once the water receded. And it was miles and miles of fence. And my grandpa, he used to call me Lightning because I'd never strike in the same place twice. When I'd put a staple in the fence, I'd go out with him, and I could never hit that staple with a hammer. So he'd call me Lightning. But I got it figured out. I can hit a staple now. But what a difference, 35 years later, the situation that we find ourselves in today. Today, you can't see the lake from my farm. It's so far away, right? And the impact is real. So when I was appointed, the entire state was in drought. Majority of the state was in the most extreme drought that's labeled by the NRCS. And today, it's a different situation. What a difference 8 months has made. We've got an incredible snowpack. We have been blessed, right? Our prayers have been answered to a certain extent. And I took on, as we had this job, it was, the governor called me up and said, "Hey, Joel, you're doing great in the legislature, but would you be interested in helping us out and helping us solve some of the problems that exist in the state? I said, Gov, record drought, Great Salt Lake's dying, it's minor issues. Sure, why not? Let's do this. I've never been one to shy away from controversy or really hard challenges. I was telling Ben, in my house, on our back door, we have a little sign that says we can do hard things. And this has been a hard thing. We've had to make decisions that have been very difficult and decisions that have been impactful, and they impact all of our lives. When we think about especially the drought and the impacts to the environment and how that interaction between us as people, how we live our lives and the environment, it's real and it's become kind of front and center. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but this kind of started this all off. New York Times came out, they did an interview, and sometimes I say lots of things. And I said, guys, we have the potential for this environmental nuclear bomb to go off in our backyard. And that was the headline of their story. And that's me, that's on my farm. This in the winter time, so it's kind of rough, it's dry and brown, but when I met before the Senate committee, for confirmation committee, they asked me, what is going to be your top priority? I said, my top priority is going to be saving the Great Salt Lake. And it has been. We have invested, when you look at the time and effort, energy, resources that we've invested in Great Salt Lake, the legislature has come on board with that. We've been able to tell this story of what the impact might be and how important and vital the Great Salt Lake is to the state of Utah and to the western United States. I've had secretaries of agriculture, of interior, of the Corps of Engineers, those types of people out. I've taken them out on Great Salt Lake and shown them firsthand what is happening to the lake. I've had our congressmen, our senators. I took Mitt Romney out. I've had all these people to say, this is the impact, guys. This is not just a Utah problem. This is a national problem. And we'll talk more about that later. But just to kind of set the table of how important this issue has been and what it means. Now, 8 months later, going from record drought to record snowpack. So today we're on flood watch. We are monitoring that closely. My phone has been blowing up all morning as I met with Ben. Different issues, it's popping up all across the state now. And we're trying to manage that. This year, our snowwater equivalent peaked at 30 inches, which is an all-time ever recorded record high. 30 inches. The previous record high was 26 inches. Our average is just over 15 inches. So we're double what we normally would get. What does that mean? In 1980s, we peaked out at about 26 inches. And you remember, well, none of you, some of you. You guys don't remember, but I tell our folks that just like my dad and grandpa would tell me about the 80s, and I was just a little kid, but they tell me about the 80s and how tough it was, and the flooding, and how severe it was. We're going to be telling our kids and grandkids about 2023. That's how much water's there, and that water has to come down. And we're on day 4 of the runoff, day 4, right? It just started this week, day 5 maybe. So it's right now, it's real, and it's happening now. So in 83, some of the differences, to be determined, right? We don't know. We don't know what the future's going to hold. In 83, the runoff didn't actually start until mid-May, and so it got really hot really fast, and that's what made it so severe. There has been significant investment in infrastructure improvements, so maybe I don't know that it'll be as bad as 83, but I do think this will be something that we will be telling future generations about for years to come. So at the Department of Natural Resources, it's a bit of a balancing act. It's kind of like that rock. I have 10 different divisions, 8 divisions, 2 offices, so 10 different agencies that I manage. And you can see the list here: forestry, fire, state lands, so all of our sovereign lands, all of our forests in the state. We coordinate closely with the federal government there. That's a very close-knit group with the BLM, with the Forest Service, the Office of Energy Development. So we manage all new development. So when we talk about the new technologies that are coming out in energy, we have that office that manages that for the state of Utah. And we're doing some amazing work. You go down into central and southern Utah, Millard County in particular, you look at what we're doing there, it's absolutely incredible, and there's so much opportunity. Division of Oil, Gas, Mining, that's a regulatory group, so we manage all of our wells, all the mining that occurs in the state. We do permitting, we do regulation, we do reclamation there. Office of Outdoor Recreation, you know, Public Lands Office, that's an office that deals in particular with legal issues associated with the federal government. There's a lot of legal issues when you deal with federal lands that we have to work through as a state. Our state parks we manage, our water resources, so we manage all development of water there, and water rights does the distribution and administration of water, another division. Wildlife resources, so we manage all the wildlife in the state, everything from the endangered species to the large mammals, the whole spectrum. We handle all of the invertebrates, you know, the bugs, everything, top to bottom, we manage. And there's numerous endangered species that we're managing as well. Right here in Utah County, I don't know if you guys saw or aware, but we just finished, I think I have a slide on this later, but spoiler alert, we did the Provo River Bay, where we recreated the flows to help the June sucker. June sucker was actually delisted this last just 2 years ago, which is awesome, and on a path to recovery. So good things are happening, and sometimes those stories don't get told, but a lot of good things happening within our department. We also do the UGS, Utah Geological Survey. One of our biggest concerns right now is, as this ground is so saturated, landslides. So UGS does all mapping for landslides. They do all the underground work, mapping and identification of what's out there, and they provide a very valuable resource. So if any of you are into geology, GIS, any of those types of fields, there's a great opportunity there. Great department or division to work for. So we manage and protect Utah's natural resources. I like to say that you think about it, what do we save up for? Right? We go to our jobs, we work, we save our money so that we can go on vacation. What do we do on vacation? We go hiking, we go visit our national parks, we go hunting, we go fishing. We do the things that we manage, that my department manages. So it's my job to manage your fun. And it's an awesome job, I love it. But it's a big job too. Because when someone goes fishing, what do they want to do? They want to catch fish, right? So there's better be fish there. When someone goes out hiking, they want to have a good trail to hike on. If the trail is degraded and deteriorated and covered in branches and it's not a good time, you know, I'm going to hear about it. And so it's my job to manage these resources and make sure that we have, I think we add significantly to the quality of life of all Utahns. And so this is our vision statement, our goals: enhance water certainty and security, improve the health and resilience of our lands, resources, watersheds, and wildlife, advance the stewardship of our public lands and natural history, elevate outdoor rec, and expand Utah's energy and mineral portfolio. So I'm going to go through and just briefly talk about each division. So forestry, fire, state lands, we create healthy forest systems. We manage fires. So when I started last July, I started July 1st. July 2nd is when the Halfway Hill fire started. It was down in Fillmore. I get a phone call. You got to go to Fillmore. It's a Sunday. And I'm like, oh. And I go down there, and it is just a raging inferno. And it is so dry and so hot. We're in the middle of this drought. We had contracted a couple helicopters, so we were able to get in front of this thing. But I'm like questioning, what on earth am I doing? You know, what my life choices? What have I done? But they do such a fantastic job. So we manage all the forest fires. We coordinate with the federal government. But it's at management, our fire teams are incredible. This department also manages all sovereign lands. So when you think about it, Utah Lake, Great Salt Lake, Bear Lake, our major river systems, the Colorado, the Bear, the Jordan, the Weber, the Provo, these are all sovereign lands. We manage all of those water bodies as well. And it's very impactful to the lives of all Utahns. So forestry, fire, state lands. So that was my first day on the job right there, guys, with the governor. So that's at the fire that exploded, right? So we manage all these issues facing Great Salt Lake. It's become front and center, and huge issues. We address the wildfire crisis throughout the West. Utah, so kind of to end the story, we after we had a couple fires break out, we were very cautious. We rolled out our ad campaign to make people aware of, we call it Fire Sense, to make people aware of the issues associated with fires, and we actually got through this last season because of the actions that were taken, and then also we had the monsoons that came through and really helped take the edge off. One of the lowest, our fire starts, human-caused fire starts were cut in half. Our natural-caused fires were significantly reduced as well. We had a tenth of the acres burned last year than what we expected, and really stayed on top of that. So it was a good outcome for the year. And one of our biggest problems in the state is what do we do with we have this overgrowth, right? We've spent 100 years suppressing fires. So our forests are old, there's a lot of beetle kill. We have this massive fuel load that exists up there. What do we do with it? We're working on ways to create marketable products. Something that creates value so that, right now any forest, whether it's a controlled burn or if it's going up there and harvesting some of that timber, we're paying for it. There's not really a marketable product for that, and it's really expensive. And so, we have millions of acres of these lands that need to be treated, and we have a limited budget. And so how can we create more of a free marketplace where these things can occur and it supports itself? So those are the kind of things we're working on. Energy development, we have working constantly towards this new energy future that exists, that's going to exist. That includes renewables, it includes a broad portfolio. Within the Office of Energy Development, we have a vision and a goal of an all of the above. So we're not opposed to some of the or traditional and historic uses, but we don't also want to be on the cutting edge and the cusp of what's new and what's innovative, and how can we advance that? And that means things like developing hydrogen technology. We started a hydrogen hub with Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. And it's centered here in Utah. And we're working diligently to make Utah the center for hydrogen development going forward. We have this really unique opportunity down in the Delta area. They have what's called the salt domes. There's these humongous salt deposits that we can go in and mine out, and they are secure and they're solid. We can pressurize like hydrogen, and it doesn't leak. That salt crust is so thick. We have these enormous storage facilities down there, natural, that we can put hydrogen, we can put fuels in, we can put other materials in, and they will store there. And basically, and this it's really interesting. The salt that exists there protects it so it doesn't deteriorate. So if we were to put gasoline in a dome, it doesn't deteriorate over time. It stays in its refined form. It's incredible. So we have a state energy plan. We administer the tax credits coming from the federal and state governments. As we look at electrification of our fleets and the direction that that's going, that's a huge issue or huge opportunity as we go forward. We partner with different agencies, our schools, the One Utah Summit, and we do renewable energy programs and grant programs. We actually just, this last legislative session, passed some legislation to create an energy innovation center, and we're going to be looking at development and doing grants for new opportunities for energy opportunities. So, OGM, oil, gas, mining. This is a regulatory agency. We issue permits, enforce, oversee rules for reclamation, and there's thousands of, just like this. You see this picture here. There's thousands of old mines just like this throughout the state, and they're a hazard. And so our job is we go through and we close those off. We reclaim them. We work on them to try to create a safety for our citizens. Outdoor recreation. This is a fairly new agency. It was created just 2 years ago by the legislature. But when we talk about quality of life, why do people, Utah in Utah County is the epicenter of it. We have a rapidly growing population. People want to be here. And why is that? We have great jobs, but we also have great quality of life. And this outdoor recreation is a key to that. People come here, they want to ski, they want to go down to our national parks, they want to ride bikes, they want to do all of these things. Because we're in an incredible place to live and to work. And so, we're looking at improving recreational access, safety, education, stewardship, building trails, and the state of Utah has made a significant investment in our outdoor recreation opportunities, and it's incredible. PLPCO is what we call it, Public Land Coordinating. This is the agency that coordinates with state the state government and the federal government, interaction that exists there. We advocate for multiple use of our public lands, and there's a lot of lawsuits there because it's a very litigious area when you're dealing with some of the conservation groups are constantly suing the feds to close access to certain areas, and we're saying no, those areas should stay open. So we have to counter-sue, and it's a very important agency. I mean, it's what protects our ability to access and utilize our public lands. Otherwise, they would be, we'd be losing the battle, and they would be off limits to us. So, our state parks, I'm sure you've all visited them. We have one just down the road, Utah Lake State Park. It's a beautiful thing. We have state parks throughout the state. We actually, interesting fun fact, last year, our state park visitation surpassed the national park visitation. So we had millions and millions and millions of people visit our state parks last year. And they're all throughout the state, and they're beautiful and they're wonderful. And I would encourage you all to go and visit them and spend time there, because Utah is an incredible place. And they're from the far northern reaches of the state to the far southern. It's not just, red rock, but it's forests and it's lakes, and it's an incredible resource that we have. The Geological Survey, like I said, it's providing scientific information about our geology that exists. So they promote responsible stewardship of our geologic and injury resources, and right now with all the moisture, there's over 100 different active landslide sites that we're monitoring. There could be one in your neighborhood. You saw some of the news this last weekend. Fruit Heights had a big landslide, but there's some. If you think back in the '80s, just up the street, up the canyon here, you had the Thistle landslide, blocked the river, buried the road, killed, destroyed the town, the flooding and everything that occurred after that. Those kind of things. We just need to be aware so that we're planning ahead and being prepared so we don't get caught off guard by those kind of things. Okay. Wildlife resources. We manage. This is a very large division. We have over 600 employees there. Lots of opportunity there if you're into wildlife, all aspects of wildlife. And they manage and serve. So under the state constitution, all wildlife in the state of Utah belongs to the public. So they have the responsibility to manage those wildlife. You've probably seen some reports this year has been extremely difficult on some of our wildlife, especially in the mountain areas with the snowpack. Deer and elk herds have been really, really impacted, negatively impacted by this winter, and this balance that exists. It's really, really difficult. So they're out there managing that, actively managing that, making sure that these wildlife are healthy, the populations are good, and that we are in good shape that way. So, there we go, the drought. You can see some pictures. I mean, it's been a very difficult winter on the deer and elk populations in northern and northeast Utah in particular. And it's coming off of these severe droughts, so the deer just weren't able to build their fat reserves and other things they need for their health. So it's pretty difficult. Here's that Provo River Delta restoration I talked about. So the June sucker was downlisted to threatened back 2 years ago. And this project is nearly complete. It's an ongoing project. We put water in it just 2 weeks ago. It's beautiful. It's incredible, and it's going to make a huge difference on Utah Lake. And it's these kind of things. So when we talk about like the Provo River coming down this year with all this water, this is going to help because it helps free up that corridor so that water doesn't get blocked and built up and cause flooding upstream. It will help pass that water through. But we created kind of an estuary where these June suckers can live and thrive, and trying to mimic more historic water flows and patterns that existed on Utah Lake. I don't know that I have a Utah Lake slide, but Utah Lake is really important to me, and I've made it a priority for our department. I want to see the investment made and the resources put to Utah Lake to see it thrive and recover. And we're doing, there's a big study that's coming out in about 6 months and making recommendations on how do we improve the water quality on Utah Lake, and then we have to determine how do we manage the lands under the lake, on the shorelines of the lake, and how do we integrate all that together so that we can really get a recovery on Utah Lake to where, literally you guys have a gem in your backyards that's underutilized. We should be out there recreating on it. We should be out there loving it, utilizing it, enjoying it, the beauty and the resource that it truly is, and we're not. And part of it is because we haven't been the nicest to it, right? We haven't, over the generations, we haven't been, there's some problems. We've got to remediate those problems and move forward. So we're working diligently to do that. Another program that we manage, this is another office, it's kind of a one-off, it's the Watershed Restoration Initiative. And I know that there's, when I was talking with some students this morning, you're doing some research on Utah Lake associated with WRI in evaluating some of the impacts, or was it on Mount Nebo? I can't remember. Was it Mount Nebo? Well, someone was in the meeting. Or you,
I'm not actively on it, but yeah.
okay, yeah. So anyway, we do projects throughout the state, but mainly focusing on these watersheds that are critical. And we annually invest over $40 million between public and private money on these projects. And they go and they do forest work, they do land work, they do reseeding, they work on invasive species. But really the ultimate goal is to improve our watersheds, because with a healthy watershed you have a healthier ecosystem, healthier wildlife, healthier plants, and vegetation, healthier ecology. So that's what we're looking at doing. And it's been a fantastic program. It's a partnership with the federal government, states, and local partners as well. King's Camo is in your backyard here. You see them off the freeway there. They actually invested private money, of their own money, several $100,000 this year in this program because they can see the benefit of it. So these are some of the projects. You can see the project concentration areas, both restoration and fire rehab. So after a fire has gone through, what do we do to rehab those areas? We reseed, we replant, we revegetate those areas so that we don't get debris flows and runoff and have negative impacts to our watersheds. But you can see over $348 million since 2006, so the last 17 years, $348 million, hundreds of partners, thousands and thousands, millions, 2.4 million acres restored. Thousands of miles of stream bed have been improved. So it's a very impactful program. So the Division of Water Rights. So we manage and distribute all the water. So under the state constitution, water belongs to the public. It's a public resource. But the Constitution allows the water to be appropriated and used by individuals like us, people. So the state engineer administers this program, appropriation and distribution of water in the state of Utah. They also oversee all dam safety. In a year like this, that's a real concern where we're going to have so much water coming down. Some of our systems have so much water upstream that they have enough water to fill the dams 4 times over. All the dams on the system. So there's that much water in the system. Sorry. And then the state engineer really, so Utah has a system of priority, or a priority-based water rights system. So whoever uses the water first in time is first in line today. So historically, the pioneers, they farmed, they used water, they agriculture, so they're still in first position today. And the state engineer administers that and creates certainty in that system. Our Division of Water Resources. So this division handles all water distribution, development, and administration of water. So they work closely with water rights, and they plan. They work with our cities on their planning, on water conservation. So you've probably heard of the Slow the Flow campaign, or WaterWise landscapes and those. That's the Water Resources that administers that and helps us work on that. So we also have a board of water resources that is a lending arm. They've lent over $1 billion since they started, and there's it's a huge value add to the state of Utah to have that as where we can kind of bring everything together and plan in broad scale across cities and counties and water jurisdiction boundaries. So they put out things like this, right? You've seen these ads on the freeway, right? Drought messaging. They have, these are some of their statistics. water conservation has really been a focus of our department. And we actually we've made significant investment in water conservation and messaging. And the legislature has really got on board with this as well. 2 years ago, we passed a year ago, we passed a secondary meter program where, in Utah, we're kind of unique. We kind of like to do things our own way. And so a lot of the houses, especially newer homes, have 2 lines going into their house. They have one that's culinary and one that's secondary. And the secondary is just basically ditch water. It hasn't been treated, it hasn't been cleaned, it's just coming out of the reservoir. It's don't drink it. But a lot of those lines were unmetered. So you paid a flat fee and you just used as much as you want all summer long. You keep that tap going, you didn't pay any extra. And we're saying that's not very smart in a desert state. We need to rethink how we manage this water. And so we passed a program where every secondary connection has to be metered by the year 2030. And then we funded it with $250 million. And that alone, so we did a test pilot project on Weber Basin. We did 10,000 homes. And we saw an average reduction of use of 30% on those 10,000 homes, just by metering. We didn't charge more. We just said, hey, you know what, you used 100,000 gallons last month. The lot size that you have, you should probably use 20,000 gallons. You're using too much. Like, it was red, right? Like, use less water. And then people started to use less. So 30% reduction. So just this program alone is going to save us about 50,000 acre feet of water consumption a year. It's going to reduce water use by 54,000 acre feet every year, which is about half the size of Earth's Echo Reservoir. So it's big. It's a huge amount of water. So it's those kind of things that we're doing. Planning. We have a turf buyback program. We're trying to promote more water-wise landscaping. We like to say if the only time, we actually have an ad campaign that's coming out, and it's going to be called "Turf Doesn't Belong Everywhere." You'll see it, and the governor's going to be wearing a grass tie as an example of grass doesn't belong everywhere. So I like to say if the only time your grass gets walked on is when you mow it, you probably shouldn't have grass there, right? So we need to be thinking about these kind of things moving forward. And some of these things are little, but when everybody does it, it's big. Right? Little things make a big difference in the long run. So what we've done as well is we have all these different programs, and we came up with a kind of an estimate of how much or how far can $1 million go. If the state invests $1 million in a program like this, how much can we save? So secondary metering. We estimate every $1 million we invest, we save 284 acre feet. The turf buyback, up to 190 acre feet per $1 million. Smart controllers, and that one knocks it out of the park, 600 acre feet per $1 million. So what that is and I'm guilty of this. I set my sprinkler timer in the springtime, and I let it go till the fall, right? What if it rains? What if it cools down? What if it's super windy outside? And all my water that my sprinkler is just going to evaporate, right? The smart controllers manage your sprinkler so they do it when it's most effective and efficient. Makes a huge difference. Toilets, shower heads, urinals, all these things. You can see, so we can kind of say, okay, what's the biggest bang for our buck? You have limited resources. What's going to make the biggest difference? We talked about landscape rebates. This last year we invested $3 million ongoing as a state into landscape rebates. So paying people to tear out their turf grass, swap it out for something more efficient. We have on social media and on the internet, we have different things like right now. So this is this week, April 7th to 13th. This is what we're putting out. Don't water your grass. There's no need. And I got word that some of the systems, secondary systems, are going to charge next week. They're going to start filling their systems next week. Don't eat that. Just because there's water there doesn't mean you should be using it, right? Don't turn on your sprinklers yet, that kind of thing. Other than Washington County, they've already hit 90 degrees. So that's an area where you're starting to see, but it's only one day a week, right? So one thing about this slide, the state is not equal. What happens in Washington County and the impacts and the responses are different than what we need to do in Cache County, for example, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all. So we also passed legislation that we are looking to reduce state agency water use. So our universities, our state buildings, the DMV offices, whatever, all those buildings, by 25% within 3 years, and putting on smart metering and looking at leading out as a state. So let's talk about some of the resources that we have. We have what we call our water budget. So the Division of Water Resources, they create this water budget where they measure. The state engineer measures the water, and then Water Resources takes that data and puts it in a usable format. And they measure all the inflows, outflows, evaporation, land uses, agricultural land uses, municipal land use, whatever it may be, what precipitation, what the diversions were, and then finally the most important thing is the depletion. So depletion is when the water is removed from the system forever. It's consumed, right? So some of the water we put on the ground, soaks in the ground, goes back in the aquifer, comes out in the river, and it's reused, right? Over and over again. The Severe River system, which is here, up through there, is the best example. That water gets used like 7 times before it hits Delta, Millard County, from the Panguitch down. Gets used, reused, go back in the ground, reused, over and over. So we come out with a state water resource plan. That's water supply and use data. We have the state government through the governor's office. We have a coordinated action plan, and this just came out. It's a very interesting kind of our long-term forecasting goals of state water. We have growing water smart workshops. This is for cities to say, okay, how can we be more water wise? How can we be smart with the water we use? So we have all these different programs, data, different aspects that we can utilize. We just came out with some new websites for Great Salt Lake. You should all check it out. It's actually fantastic, great. Provides some resources, great information, detail, and helps us in the management and getting the people involved in the management of Great Salt Lake. Drought.utah.gov also provides some really helpful information on how we manage the drought. Okay, so the elephant in the room for the past number of years has been the Great Salt Lake. It's the big thing, right? It's something that we're all concerned with. And there was some polling done last winter, just before the legislative session. Said, people of Utah, what is your biggest concern? And 80% of the people said Great Salt Lake and the drought. That was their number one concern. Number 2, at 20%, was homelessness and housing affordability. Okay? So to put in perspective how impactful, how front of mind this issue is to everybody in the state of Utah, we have to get this right. This is our opportunity to get this right. And you saw the legislature really step up. We've invested over $1 billion in the last 2 years in water conservation, water development, and Great Salt Lake. We'll talk about some of the programs that are there. Great Salt Lake is a critical resource for the United States. Baseline is brine shrimp. You've got 12 million birds migrate through and utilize Great Salt Lake. You've got an ecosystem that exists there that's unique in the United States. And also you have industry. So one of the industries is mineral development. Did you guys know that the only source of magnesium production in the United States comes off of Great Salt Lake? Nowhere else in the U.S. do we produce magnesium. Great Salt Lake will be the largest producer of lithium in the United States once it's up and running. We're working with companies right now to develop that technology and have that up and going. And it will be happening within the next few years. So more lithium on the Great Salt Lake than anywhere else in production in the United States. Sulfate of potash. If any of you have ever eaten an almond, a pistachio, a fruit coming out of California, it was fertilized with fertilizer off Great Salt Lake. These brine shrimp, their cysts, the artemia, goes into like shrimp, aquaculture. So if you've eaten shrimp at a restaurant or bought some from the store, you're buying shrimp that was fed brine shrimp off of Great Salt Lake, guaranteed. 40% of the world's supply of brine shrimp comes off of Great Salt Lake and the artemia from the brine shrimp. So huge, important resource. And it's been drying out. And the consequences are dire. we've seen story after story of increased dust into our populations, and that's a huge concern. We've seen story after story about the salinity rising and an ecosystem collapse out on the lake, and it's our job to mitigate those impacts and to protect the lake long term. So, one thing that we've recognized about Great Salt Lake is there is no one single thing that will save the lake. There is no silver bullet. It's going to take time. It's taken us 35 years from our peak of the lake to get to where we are today. So it's going to take us time to get back and recover this lake. It doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take years, but we're on a great trajectory now. We can't control the weather, so we must be prepared for a drier future. We've seen estimates. Our precipitation is going to stay about the same, but our evaporation is going to go up. And so we need to plan on a more arid and drier future. So ultimately it's coming up with balanced solutions. And at DNR we're working on those balanced solutions. It's short-term things. So you may have seen that the Great Salt Lake is split into two sides. There's a north arm and a south arm. And there's a breach in that, or there's a causeway, right? And in that causeway there's a breach that lets the water pass back and forth. And with that, we were seeing really adverse impacts to the main body of the lake, that south arm. And so I got the governor issue an executive order. We closed off that breach temporarily, but we're seeing significant rebound of the lake. Last year, the lake salinity levels topped out at about 19%, 18.5%, 19%. We saw a decline of brine shrimp and their reproduction of brine shrimp was non-existent. Brine flies were non-existent. They were really impacted. And today we're seeing salinity has now dropped with all the inflows of the lake, has now dropped to below 15%, back into a healthy range. So significant impact. And the runoff has been going. The lake has already received more water this year than it did the last 2 years combined. So what a difference a year can make. So we did the causeway berm. This is a picture of Antelope Marina. There's actually water in the marina today. It was bone dry for the last 3 years. There's about 2 inches of water in there. So we're optimistic that we'll have some boats in there soon. Great Salt Lake Marina, which is down by Saltaire on the south arm of the lake, down by Tooele, was bone dry as well. In fact, so USGS runs a monitoring station there. So when you if you go on the USGS website, you see what the elevation of the lake is. For the first time in recorded history, since 1848, it went dry this year. In November, it was high and dry. They had to shut that monitoring station down because it was mud. There was no more water there. There's water there today. There's actually nearly 2 feet of water there today. And boats are able to navigate in and out. Shallow, draft boats can get in and out of there now. So again, significant improvement. And I think with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about, my optimism going forward for the lake and for the people of Utah. We're seeing these kind of changes. We're seeing the lake improve. We're seeing the people of Utah respond. Whether it's, last year there was a call for action. The governor called for a fast to help kind of bring some rain and some moisture. And guess what? It didn't come. But, what happened? People responded. People said, if it's serious enough, the governor's going to ask for this. Maybe I can water my lawn twice a week instead of 4 times a week. You drive around town, you saw a lot of brown yards, right? Agriculture responded. Started watering a little bit less, maybe skipping that last crop of hay, letting that water stay in the system, right? And we saved tens of billions of gallons last year alone. And then the rain started coming. We had a really wet fall. We've had a huge winter. Those prayers are answered. And it's made a difference. And I'm super optimistic because the people of Utah have responded. Now, we're not there. We've got to continue on this path. And Great Salt Lake is, needing the attention still. Even though we're up 3.5 feet today from our low, we're still at record lows. Like, we're not out of the woods. The lake still needs to go up another 7-8 feet from where it is today to get back a more healthy, sustainable range. And GSL, it takes money. All of these actions take a lot of investment. Investment from the legislature, investment from us as citizens. So this shows, agriculture use is about 65% of the Great Salt Lake watershed. M&I, 18%. The mineral companies are about 8%. So the evaporation that comes off of our man-made reservoirs is 1%, and then the managed wetlands around the lake consume about 9%. So you can see where these demands are, the balancing act occurs. So agriculture uses by far the largest amount of water. They were also here first, right? We talked about that priority system that exists. So how do we, I've seen reports, you guys have seen them too. We should stop growing alfalfa in the state of Utah, right? What are farmers doing to help the lake? What are we doing, right? Agriculture has the fundamental right to be able to, use their water in the way they see fit. That is a core principle and tenet of our water right system in its law. So how do we address that? Well, when I was in, I served in the state legislature. When I was in there, I created a program called the Ag Optimization Program. We funded it, put a few $1 million in there just to do some tests. And so we can try to force agriculture to do something, or we can bring them along willingly. We can help show them how they can use less water by investing in water efficient technologies, changing crop types, looking at soil amendments and doing different practices with the soil to retain moisture so you don't have to water so often. Those kind of things, right? So last year we invested, here we go. Yeah. Oh, sorry. We invested, it doesn't say here, we invested $200 million in ag optimization. $200 million. The demand there is so huge. And part of the reason I'm optimistic is because I've seen a response from our agriculture community. They want to make a difference. Growth. We are the fastest growing state in the country. Utah County is the epicenter of that growth. There's going to be 1 million more people in Utah County in the next 30 years. Where are they going to go? What water are they going to use? Are you guys going to be part of that? Are you guys going to build houses and live here? The decisions we make today impact this water situation tomorrow. So what are we going to do? We got to be smart about that. It's a balanced approach. Industry, talked about that, the mineral extraction. So here's that, magnesium's used in a lot of different processes. Lithium, talked about that. Brine shrimp, I talked a little bit about that, but 40% of the world's brine shrimp comes off of Great Salt Lake. 45 million tons of brine shrimp. Wildlife. This is one of the biggest concerns I have. This last year, Great Salt Lake became so concentrated and salty that we started seeing this collapse. We have key targeted species. So you got eared grebes, these devil-looking birds. About 90% of the world population of eared grebes utilize the Great Salt Lake. 5 million birds. Okay, they come here to molt, to replenish on their migration. So when they're molting, they can't fly. If there's no brine shrimp for them to eat, what happens to them? They die. Right? You imagine 5 million eared grebes, 90% of the world's population dying out there? That would be really, really bad. So we, Wildlife Resources, the Great Salt Lake, Sovereign Lands, we can manage this. This little guy is a snowy plover, one of the largest concentrations of snowy plover on the earth. This white cloud, that's actually the Wilson's phalarope, largest population of Wilson's phalarope in the world, also Great Salt Lake. That Wilson's phalarope is an amazing story. It migrates nearly 5,000 miles, 7,000 miles, all the way down to Argentina, back and forth. It's incredible, right? There's a story to be told. So this ecosystem's competing for water. We talk about the salinity. You guys saw pictures. These are the microbialites and the bioherms that exist out there. This is where that base of that food chain occurs. Ski industry. You guys saw nearly over 800 inches in our Salt Lake ski resorts. What's the difference between snowbird and Sundance? Snow. But why? Lake effect? No lake effect, right? Nearly 300 inches this year difference in snow. And it's directly related to that lake effect snow. That's how important that is. It extends the ski season. It's a huge industry for the state of Utah. $1.2 billion, 20,000 jobs. The costs associated with the lake are astronomical. We've got to do everything we can to protect this lake. So This year, we like to call it the year of water in the legislature. I talked about $200 million for ag optimization, we did an additional $20 million for additional loans for ag projects. Utah Waterways, this is a great new program we're doing to raise awareness. This is going to be like an educational and advertising campaign statewide, really supercharging that. You'll see it's just getting off the ground now, but we've had partners including groups like the Larry H. Miller Companies, Rio Tinto, the LDS Church, and others wanting to help us and invest in this to share this message. We created a Great Salt Lake Commissioner. So we have a new role, a new position, a person that will be one of the most powerful people in the state of Utah, managing Great Salt Lake. It's going to be a concentrated effort where all this information will be able to flow through. Cloud seeding, we talked about this, or we didn't talk about this, but we've really ramped up our cloud seeding program. Before we were spending about $350,000, we're now going to be spending $5 million. So over tenfold in that program. It's statewide. We've got some planes that are going to be going out, and we're going to utilize these storms as they come through. We're going to try to maximize the benefit that comes out of those storms. Mapping. Good data drives good decisions. So we're looking at doing the mapping. If some of you are interested in GIS or geological type stuff, this is a great opportunity. You saw 2 weeks ago that LDS Church announced they're donating nearly 20,000 acre feet, over 20,000 acre feet actually, of water to the Great Salt Lake. This was a collaborative effort we've been working on for months and months and months. And it's really the LDS Church and the leadership of the church, the bishopric and the first presidency, saying this is important and we need to do everything we can as a people to help protect and save Great Salt Lake. So huge, great opportunity, and it really establishes a framework for future partnerships. These are all the different agencies that have an impact on Great Salt Lake. You can see there's a lot. This is why we need that Great Salt Lake Commissioner to coordinate all of this. You have, so statewide, you have air quality, water quality, sovereign land, state parks, wildlife resources, water rights, water resources, Department of Ag, the UGS. On the feds, you got the Corps, EPA, Fish and Wildlife, USGS, Interior, Bureau of Reclamation. It goes on and on. A lot of cooks in the kitchen, if you will. And finally, ultimately, we will rely on Mother Nature, right? We can do everything we can. I think it's our responsibility to do everything we can. And then we've got to have some faith to rely on Mother Nature, on God to help us with a year like this. And this year, every basin in the state received over 135% of their typical moisture. Some lots, even today, are over 200%. And now we're going to deal with floods, but we'll deal with it, right? I'd rather be dealing with floods than drought. So this is the snow water equivalent in our snowpack. I don't know if you all seen this chart before. It's put out by the USDA NRCS. So the purple line is the previous record all-time high. If you look, the red line on the bottom is, or the black, well, let's see. So the kind of the red shaded line was last year. So last 2 years, we were like here at the bottom. This year, we've almost tripled our snow water equivalent. That's the amount of water in our snowpack. This year alone, nearly tripled from the last 2 years. So we're in record-setting territory. With that is the potential for record-setting floods. We hope that downward trend doesn't do what that purple line did and all come at once. We hope it does something more measured, like it did in 2017. 2017 was a big year, but it came down nice and slow. So we'll see. But even today, even with all the snow that's already melted and the water we've already received downstream, we're still in record territory. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we've got to keep our foot on the gas. This one good year doesn't get us out of the drought. It doesn't end the cycle. We've got to plan for the future. There's going to be more and more demands on these systems, more and more demands on the natural resources, and we have to be prepared for that. We can't rely on these big water years every year, year after year. We have got to be recognize that we're in a terminal basin and there's a finite resource. We've got to live within our means. And so that means continued investment in conservation, changing the way we live our lives. I mentioned we were just over in Israel. And over there they do a fantastic job of recognizing how, like the true value of their natural resources, of their water and of their land. I like to say here in America, in Utah, in America, we have a nursery rhyme or saying. When it's raining, we say, "Rain, rain, go away, come again another day." Right? We're saying, "Get out of here, rain. We don't like you." That's our culture. That's what we're teaching our kids. In Israel, they have a little nursery rhyme, and they say, "It's raining, clap your hands, and shout for joy," because they love the rain. What a difference that makes from a young age to adulthood, right? So, how do we change who we are? How do we change our culture? How do we change our fundamental interaction with our water? That's where this all begins. And that's how we manage this resource. That's what we're working on. We've got to have a different mindset. You're all going to be part of that. You're all going to play a factor and a role in that. How do we prepare for the future? So we cannot take our foot off the gas. We've got to keep up the pressure. So thank you. I think we have 5-10 minutes for any questions. So it's been an honor being here with you. Questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. So, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. It's been often said, you know, he thinks it's a real asset that both our governor and yourself are farmers.
Yeah.
Which I totally agree with. I think it's so important that you guys can kind of, you know, have this relationship. I guess what I'm wondering is you talked about so much of the things that we can be doing to conserve water, which is really important because I think we all have a part to play in this. But ultimately, the maximum place that we have to conserve water is in agriculture.
Yeah.
And you talk about Israel and how they have built up so that they can really keep their farmland sacred and because they need to eat.
They're not in the most friendly neighborhood,
So,
right?
Maybe even less friendly than ours, who knows?
Oh, definitely.
But
Have you seen what's going on over there right now? Like,
I thought you meant in terms of drought conditions.
no, I'm talking in terms of like if they don't have food, will their neighbors give it to them?
Right.
Like they're in trouble. So they've got to protect their own, right? They've got to recognize that importance. So anyway.
And in terms of protecting your own, I guess what I'm concerned about with the alfalfa is it's not necessarily adding to Utah's food security, right? Or not even necessarily Utah's economy. And so I'm just wondering, you talk about water being allocated and not owned by these farmers, allocated to and not owned by these farmers, right?
Appropriated, yeah.
Appropriated.
Mm-hmm.
What is the message to farmers right now in terms of not just ways to out-technology our way out of the crisis, but to really reduce water consumption in the agriculture sector?
It's a great question, and you're right. Agriculture is using the largest amount of water in the state, and but you also and a lot of that is going towards alfalfa. A majority of that water use within agriculture is to alfalfa. Now, alfalfa is kind of a unique crop, and I grow a lot of alfalfa on my farm. It's a crop that's very drought resilient. It can handle the cold. It can handle high elevations. It's very nutritious for our animals. In Utah, the highest value agriculture product that we raise is livestock. It's not alfalfa. It's not fruits, cherries or peaches or whatever. It's not vegetables. It's livestock. And what do those livestock need? They need alfalfa. They eat that, right? Dairies, in particular, got to have that alfalfa. And so, fundamentally, how do we change the narrative of the alfalfa's got to be grown everywhere, anywhere it can? I think that's your question, right? Like, I don't think it's the role of government to come in and say it's illegal to grow alfalfa. It's not the role of state government. I think that would be wrong. And I think alfalfa does play a very important role in the agriculture industry and in the food supply that we have, right? Utah is not a huge agriculture state. There's only about 1.5 million acres of irrigated farmland in Utah. Okay, statewide. One county in, Nebraska is that many. To put in perspective, right? or in Iowa or in the Corn Belt, right? And so what does it mean if we, how do we convince our farmers? And so part of the way is we show them new technologies. Maybe we have economic opportunity where they can say, I'm going to skip my fourth cutting, which is pretty poor, or my third cutting, whatever it is. It's pretty poor. You don't irrigate it, and let's send that water downstream. We've now created the mechanisms whereby we can do those things. We can do split season leasing, we can do in-stream flows, we can actually incentivize and pay those producers to manage their products a little bit differently. In Israel in particular, you bring that example, what they've done is they price their water, everyone pays the same. There is all water is owned by the state. The government owns the water, they have a water authority that sets a price, and everyone pays the same amount. And it's expensive. And so how do we, I guess the question is how do we manage our water here in Utah, and how can we incentivize our producers to change crops or to water in a different way or to become more efficient with how they water? And part of that is providing information and knowledge. Utah State University has, through the extension and then also through the research that they do a lot of work to demonstrate proper agriculture techniques. But one of the things I'm most encouraged about is, when you talk about water use and consumption of water, you're talking about two things. You're talking about evaporation and transpiration in crops, right? So how much water is evaporated into the atmosphere and how much is taken up by the plant and then transpired out of the leaves again into the atmosphere. That's the consumption of that water. Well, when you look at a sprinkler out there, you see that misting water. There's a lot of that water that's just evaporating off, right? When you flood irrigate and you saturate your soil, that water evaporates off. What if what some of the things Israel has done is gone to drip technology. They never saturate the soils, right? That water's underground and is at the roots, never evaporating off. There might be some leaching, but if you eliminate the E out of your ET, evapotranspiration, what do? So we're doing some testing here. And they do have, Israel's developed technology to do permanent drip irrigation where they can do it on alfalfa. And you're cutting your water consumption in half. So those kind of things, right? So is the investment worth it? That's what we have to decide. Will agriculture accept those kind of technologies? We have to decide. We have to create an environment where innovation thrives, new technologies thrive, and that's how we overcome that. So that's what I think. And also an environment where, I answered that question way too long, I'm sorry. But an environment where not just technology and innovation thrive, but economically it makes sense, right? There's got to be an incentive and marketability of the product to do that. So, can I ask any other questions? I'm sorry.
We'll probably release everybody, and if anybody has any
if you want to stay, I'm going to stay for another 10 minutes, then I'm going to go. So.
But let's give them a round of applause and say thank you.